Hello, everyone. Welcome to the new season, season 4 of the Top Cyber Pro podcast. If you would have asked me a few years ago, would I be here at season 4? I would have told you right away, no, I can never see myself because I'm not the kind of person that likes to be in front of camera. I'm the writer, the creative, the person behind the curtain. I'm like the Wizard of Oz. I'd rather be behind the curtain, not on the stage. But here we are at season 4, and we got a great episode to start off this season, and we have a topic that is a topic that is really a focus of mine as well as a lot of other cybersecurity solution architects, especially when you're dealing with zero trust and other type of programs of this nature. And this is the first time this topic has been brought up on the Top Cyber Pro podcast. And we have one of the top experts in the world working for one of the best organizations in the world, MITRE. But we have Dr. Deanna Caputo with us today. So, Doctor, would you just give a quick introduction for yourself? Because I know I missed a lot of hats and a lot of things in that quick intro there.
No, excellent. Yes. So I'm Deanna Caputo. I'm a social and personality psychologist by training. So I'm out of what would have been maybe perhaps normal. But social psychologists focus on attitudes and intentions and behaviors. So we measure them and then we try to change them, social influence. So you can imagine that might be a really good fit for insider threat. But like most other experts, you sort of fall into these opportunities, even if you didn't intend to. So I came out of my graduate program and I was a jury and trial consultant, which is a very interesting job to have had for a year.
Mhm.
Worked on a murder trial with a lawyer who is, how are you not going to mess up my trial and convict my person? And so juries, though, are not a lot different than workforce, right?
Yeah.
You're trying to understand kind of where they're at, how they're reacting to the people standing in front of them, telling them a story or directing them to do something, and then deciding if they're going to be the right fit to understand what you're going to show them, right? You're going to present evidence. Are they going to even understand what it means? So it's putting together a jury of people who just will understand what you're trying to share and then don't have an aversion to you from the first moment they see you, right?
Yeah.
That nonverbal reaction. And so it was pretty wild to go, from that to the intelligence community, which is entirely different than that community. And I did some wonderful human factors profiling for the military.
Mhm.
I'm a big fan of supporting our military to do their job safely, and there are lots of foreign actors, and so I got to use my, human skills to sort of build information profiles for them so that we could engage them and they could do their jobs more safely. So it's one of those roundabout, you went from what? You're a psychologist to juries and trials, still a little what, to intelligence, you do what? Where you couldn't tell anybody what you did. So
Yeah.
it was an interesting world. And then 17 years here at MITRE. And it's been like a different job every year. And I've gotten a chance to do another totally different thing that I'm sure we're going to talk about. So.
Awesome. Well, you mentioned that you worked on some trials, and in the past few years we always hear it come up every now and then because of shows like CSI. I think they had like 4 or 5: CSI Vegas, Miami, New York, and there's a bunch of other procedural type of forensic type shows where lots of audiences of people around the world that end up being selected for juries. It's that CSI effect where they think that DNA just happens in like 5 minutes because that's the show runtime, or that there's always DNA, or there's always just compelling forensic evidence that beyond a doubt. But have you experienced that in your interactions in that realm?
Yeah, I think people they hope for that a silver bullet, which also parallels insider threat greatly because we want that silver bullet, but it doesn't exist. But it doesn't exist for juries, right? They want something so compelling to make it an easy decision.
Yeah.
The reason there's 12 people sitting there is because it's not an easy decision,
Yeah.
right? That's how our legal system is set up to you have to convince, right? And you
Mhm.
have to have enough compelling information. And I think that's a challenge people have. And one of them, the murder trial, there was like a boot print under the body. And the question is, can I get someone with a background enough to even believe the science? Because it was actually the opposite. On some of that stuff, people almost, because you have to interpret the size, they freak out. And if it's not clear enough, they just say, I don't know if I believe that, right? They
Yeah.
could have manipulated that size. So I got a physicist. So that's the closest, but they know enough about mathematics. So
Yeah.
you have to even be that creative. I'm
Yeah.
looking for a background on someone. They have to, not science or boot measuring, but just mathematics, where we can
Mathematics. Yeah.
explain some math and you can explain it to the rest of the jury in the room that
Mhm.
this is legit, right? That expert did their job and this is the boot size kind of thing. So it is always, we always want the easy button as humans because we're overtaxed and our brains are so busy. Unfortunately, the easy button's rarely there. It happens occasionally.
Mhm.
Aside from medical tests and blood tests, I feel like blood test gets us the closest to like an answer on a lot of things. The rest of life is a lot of interpretation.
And talking about your expertise and your studies in behavioral sciences, one of my favorite behavioral type of experts in the world is Chris Voss, who is a former FBI agent. He's well versed in negotiations, but he's also talks about the concept of human behavior. We default to no. So he talks about changing the ask and how you ask the question so that, are you opposed to having a meeting? Not, do you have time for a meeting? Because people usually want to say, no, I don't have time. But if you say, are you opposed? They'll still say no. They're not opposed. And it's just that simple little change up in the question and how people by default want to say no. So I can see the same thing where do we want to convict this person of murder? No. We want to be compelled to the yes. And so I see where it can be quite a challenge dealing with like really dug in behaviors. But so along that lines, I want to talk about there was a chapter you contributed to a Insider Threat book, a publication that was in 2021. Can we talk a little bit about that and what that chapter was comprised of?
Sure, and that chapter came about in a very interesting way because it's the International Handbook of Threat Assessment, which is not purely insider threat. The most of the book is not about insider
Mhm.
threat because threat assessment doesn't have to be worker on worker, right? So if for insider threat, workplace violence is a thing. Threat assessment is an amazing skill and something we need, but that would for insider threat that would be a worker on worker, right?
Mhm.
Somebody coming out like a spouse and harming someone in your workplace, it's sort of an insider threat, but not really, right? It's a physical security threat, them
Yes.
coming in. So that book is all about all the kinds of threat assessment materials. I was briefing a government group when I met Reed Malloy, who's the editor of that book, and I was briefing about Project Slammer, which was a data set of 45 convicted spies. And it's this amazing rich data set that was collected. It was long ago, and they 14 and a half hour interviews with these spies. So it's a rich data set, asked everything under the sun. Then there was some controversy before they even had done all the transcriptions and things, and so they shut down the program and hid away the data. And a fantastic behavioral scientist, Dr. Kirk Kennedy, who's a clinical psychologist, started working at the DOJ, and he convinced them to release that data. And we
Okay.
got the opportunity to do that and MITRE, which is a huge privilege, right? We got to read and hand annotate behaviors out of all those interviews by hand. Because we only got one shot. When you get one
Yeah.
shot at data, you're going to do it thoroughly. And they had no automation anyways on those systems. But the great part is, he was watching me brief that and he saw research. So in workplace violence and threat assessment, it's hard to research it, if that makes sense. Like
Mhm.
it's a different kind of problem and we don't expose people to violence and see what they do. But for insider threat, we do. And so I was talking about Project Slammer a little bit, and I was talking about the other experiments we do with real employees to learn. And he just thought the research was so great. And he called me afterwards and was like, "Will you write a book chapter?" And I'm like, "I don't really do threat assessment, right? And I don't do a lot of workplace violence." He goes, I want you to talk about how you do research, how you
Mhm.
take this very practical problem and still do applied research. And so I was very honored to be asked, and it was a great chapter to write. And so yeah, and then I get to write a new one on a whole other sector I'm writing right now. Some editors are working on a book on again, an international handbook, but on research security. How
Okay.
are we going to protect all of that amazing higher education and academic, and even some MITRE like academic lab research? How are we going to protect it from the adversaries? How are we going to get it in our national security in a safe way? Like how do we deliver it uncompromised? By the time it gets delivered, right, it's already compromised, whether it's a weapon system or even a great idea for even a cyber information sharing. And so I've been asked to write a chapter on insider risk and research security. So we've been trying to help that sector, whole different sector than the US government even. But the DoD especially has a huge investment in research, like fundamental research, non-classified research, and they need it to be better protected. And that's just not a space where faculty and those kind of researchers even understand the concept of security. It's just not
Mhm.
a world they live in. And how do we introduce that world, just per your comment about language? How do you
Yes.
explain to them what that is in a way that will remotely make them care? Or make them comply, whichever it is you
Sure.
need, which we really want. I want both. I want a little bit of caring and obviously complying, but and so that book chapter is being written now. And so I think it'll be out towards the end of 2025, but that'll be another place to try to expand what we know and try to help a whole other sector protect our interests. We have a lot of U.S. interests in research.
Awesome. Before we get right into the insider threat, which is the meat of our discussion, I just it just popped in my head while you was talking about all the research done and analysis, and sometimes looking for like root causes or trying to get to a final conclusion. Sometimes when you're doing this research with all this data set, is there any time that you find any value in using any philosophical razors into trying to come at the data at different perspectives? Like Occam's razor is probably the most famous razor that most people know about, but there's like Hanslow's razors, there's Adler's razor. There's so many different razors. Do you ever come across that in your research or your analysis?
I'm not familiar with all of those razors, but I will say we find that the razors and then just general, even psychology theories, not so helpful.
Okay.
I think they can make you think broadly. We can talk about this problem all day long. There's
Hmm.
all sorts of things about behavior, but right now, what the insiders, risk and threat program leaders need from us is
Hmm.
practical solutions, right?
Yeah,
Something they can
out
use
of operation.
tomorrow.
Hmm.
Yeah, they need, those solutions to be smarter. They need how they engage with their employees to be strategic in the language they use and when they share it and what they share. And so I think we don't have I guess I'll call it the privilege to use those theories and the razors and kind of come at it with because we have enough that we know we need to do
Yeah.
that we just haven't been able to do. So it's not a
Agreed.
lack of good ideas, it's a
Yeah.
lack of execution of the research to validate those
Yes.
ideas. And so I think maybe someday I have a whole team now at MITRE that only works on insider threat. Just about a dozen. That's a lot of work
Wow,
for
that's
us.
a lot of dedication right
Yeah.
there.
So maybe
So
we'll get to the point where we're like, you know what, the practical ideas we've run out. Then we get to bring in the razors. We get to bring in odd theories of human behavior. I
mhm.
think then maybe we'll get there, but I think we're a little ways from that yet.
Ways from
So
it. So now insider threat. So a lot of folks, if they're in cyber and you're watching this to this point, everybody, we're preaching to the choir what insider threat is, but there's a lot of work being done by MITRE and the doctor here to really take it to another level because I'll be honest, I've worked in the Department of Defense for a long time as a defense contractor, and year after year we got to do this annual awareness training, this cyber annual awareness, and there's a little bitty small section about insider threats, and it's usually a animation video of like different spies and different indicators of threat, and you're supposed to do the math. And okay, they're going through a divorce. They're talking about taking an expensive trip. There's a lot of things that's in there, but one of the things that I've worked overseas for a long time, and overseas defense contractors, we're kind of the context of our lives are slightly different from stateside. So when you look at this training, yeah, if it's someone that's making, let's say, 140, 150,000, they're living in the DC area, that's not a lot of money when you consider taxes, housing costs, and kids and all of this. Two people working in the household. So yeah, of course that's a big red flag. If they're all of a sudden they're taking a trip to Disney, then a trip to Disney, Japan, and they're flying all over the world, yeah, that's a big red flag. But when you're a defense contractor and you're making, let's say, 200 plus K with 120 something foreign earned income exclusion, so you get tax less on federal taxes. So you have all these advantages to being overseas that there's a lot of colleagues that work with that fly to Dubai like once a month. And when you think about Dubai, people think, oh, that's like these Instagram stars and influencers that are in Dubai all the time. But there's these defense contractors that it's only like $150 round trip. So then these flags that would be flags in the States, given a normal family context in the States, but when you get overseas, we're already on this side of the world. So for me to fly to London, I could fly for like 250 if I buy the ticket in advance. So my social media may show that, oh, I'm in London, I'm in Istanbul, I'm in this, but I'm already on this side of the world. So there has to be something more besides like a affluent lifestyle, frequent foreign travel, or things of that. So first, before I kind of went too far down tangent, let's just talk a little bit about what constitutes an insider threat, and I'll let the doctor give the MITRE and her definition of it. So sorry, I went a little ahead there.
no, I think you're describing, use the right words right in there. It's called context. So a lot of things need context to be risky, right? So it isn't that you're foreign travel, it's that you don't report foreign travel, right? So it's the process of what you reveal and don't reveal information or do things or not do things. Where are you supposed to be versus where you're actually at? And so that is context. And without that context, it's already hard, and it's hard because pairing the context with data at the same time is very, very hard, and that's what makes insider threat complicated, right?
Mhm.
And we have to break down the different types of insider threats, right? So we have our malicious insiders
Yep.
who come in. I don't mean they came in, they were like before they were hired even, but they've decided they know they're doing something bad and they know it's going to have a bad outcome,
Hmm.
right? And so we have our malicious, and they're right now, it's unauthorized disclosure, IP theft, it's espionage if it's going foreign, but it's the same thing. You're giving away something that you shouldn't be, it's not yours. There's
Hmm.
still sabotage. I would say that's still less often than people think. But we also add workplace violence to that list now, poor insider threat programs. They now have domestic extremism on their obligations to deter, detect, and mitigate, which is a whole other ball of wax of things to look for. And even things like suicide is also now kind of added to their insider threat mix. And so there's all these pieces of that. But what people say in non-malicious, I think, is really important. And this is a message that we say constantly. I feel like a broken record, but I do think it's important. In the non-malicious world, most when I'm out there talking to people, all I hear about is negligent employees. Negligent employees, they're negligent, they careless, they don't care. They're non-malicious, but they still are careless and don't care. And we definitely have employees that knew what they were doing and they knew they weren't supposed to do it. They probably didn't anticipate the negative outcome, right, intentionally, but they did know that there could be a negative outcome and they weren't supposed to do something, and they're negligent, and that they definitely happen. But we have humans that make mistakes. And so our tolerance for ourselves has really gotten low. We allow computers and data to make mistakes constantly, and we tolerate that without as much complaint as one might expect since we created them. But when humans make mistakes, we're very judgy, very fast. And it is hard to tell if it wasn't really an accident or if it was negligence. But it does matter because the way you label as a security professional is how you talk to them. The tone you have, the way you engage with them, the way you even look at them when you go up to an employee and you're trying to figure out whether it's intentional or not, or even just educate them or let them know, or if there's a consequence, it frames how they think. So if I make a mistake and you treat me like a negligent employee, I'm not even going to try anymore. So you've literally lost a sensor,
Yeah.
right? Because self efficacy means that I can do something about this. You're asking me to do something and I feel capable.
Hmm.
Well, I cannot feel capable of never ever making a mistake on pushing the wrong button or replying to the wrong person who seemed real and they did a good job, tricking me. And so if you don't separate those out, we're literally going to lose a great human sensor, which are the people trying who
Yeah.
actually just made a mistake once,
Yeah.
which is going to happen. The amount of times that we're getting thrown malicious stuff is so often now that statistically all of us, no matter how
Yes. Yeah.
expert we are
Hmm.
going to make a mistake. And then there's the outsmarted category, which means I call them 0 day social engineering. You can call it whatever you want, but we hadn't seen it before, right? It's a new way that they're approaching, attacking our people, and we haven't trained them. We haven't even prepared them. We didn't even know. So why would I go up to that employee and like somehow
They
make
start
them feel
beating them.
bad?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a quiet shaming. No one's like, it doesn't even have to be a big beating, but you look at them like they were supposed to figure it out, or you're trying to figure out if they're negligent instead of acknowledging like, wow, let's hear about your experience now so that we can learn something to
Yes.
help the rest
Lessons
of the
learned. Yeah.
employees. So again, lost opportunities. How you label people affects how you treat people. And I do think in insider threat, we've not been doing it the right way long enough. And so we need to be very intentional about the types. Malicious, we can be very angry about them. We can be very strict and we can do all that. When we're talking non-malicious, we have to be a little more open-minded or we lose out, like security, meaning we're the losers of doing it wrong. And so I think that is those distinctions become really important then.
In the environments that I work in, I have an incident handling section, and a lot of times, there's when the militaries, come out, there's like an in brief, and they are particularly told about don't plug your phones into the network, don't plug any non-authorized devices. They're given this, they sign it when they do their user account paperwork. They're required to do the DoD Cyber Awareness Challenge, so they get it at least 2, 3 times when they come into the theater. The issue is that we still have throughout their deployment, they'll have people that, oh, I was only trying to charge my phone. And even though we have technical solutions, I won't go into details, but there are solutions that technically mitigate no data is going to leave the network. So we already know that that was never a threat, but it still was the attempt that the users connected. And again, most of the time people say, oh, my bad, I was just stupid, I made a mistake, and mea culpa. Okay, But then when we see it twice, or sometimes even three times from the same individual, that's where I'm now recommending to that leadership to put a entry into the system for this clearance, the JPass system. And a lot of times I get challenged by that because no one wants to do anything adverse to a uniformed military person trying to do their job. But when you see this much negligence from an individual, once it hits two times in a row within a short, let's say 6 months to a year period, I tell them the reason why it's important to put a note into. We're not trying to get rid of their clearance. We're just trying to make a note of this because if they go forward into their career and it starts happening, it becomes a pattern that at least someone, a security manager down the road, can launch an investigation based on some notes they might have said. Okay, this person is consistently being negligent. So there's something there that training is not fixing. Um, so I don't want to go too much down that rabbit hole, but I do see that there's a lot of value in understanding behaviors, and then even for security managers and folks at all levels of defense, federal, that they need some more insight into how to kind of look at the situations in a different light. So, what is the work that you and your team at MITRE are doing to help with this problem? Because, as we said, context is everything. But then, what I see from my perspective versus another 100 security managers in the world looking at the same thing, they may see different, they may see it more malicious or more negligent. But what is the work that you and your team are doing that I'm hoping is going to be something really innovative in this sector?
So we have two. We go at it two ways. So my kind of motto for the team is we think big, we start small, and we move super fast. That gives me the ability also to get funding for. So we are chopping at the pieces on purpose, right? You're
Mhm.
not going to solve it in one big
Yeah, you're
thing.
not trying to boil the ocean.
Yeah, I mean, we have the one big thing, and I'll tell you about the framework that we're working towards, but you don't want to wait for that. You want us to be doing more than that. And so along the way, we spend about half our time helping programs build, right? Having a proper program with proper authorities and banners, and you're actually collecting endpoint data because that's where you're going to get the context to just, to explain a lot of things people are doing, right? That you might not be able to explain if you didn't have other little bits of pieces of information about what they're doing on your network and in your systems. And so that endpoint visibility is very important. The problem is that we get the endpoint visibility and everybody wants the magic indicators and they want predictive. And this field is not predictive. Even cyber wasn't predictive until like 30, 40 years in when there was so much data. And we have more data on adversaries. We have more APT patterns. Like you need volumes of data to be predictive. And fortunately, we don't have volumes. That's a good thing almost. We don't have enough insiders that volume is going to come as fast as it did for outside breaches and things. But we're getting there. But while we work on that, we can start putting better indicators on those endpoints and tools. And we don't have to wait for known bad to learn things. And this is where psychology is fantastic for the cyber community because it's just not something they're expert in or security community. We know how to put people in environments and see how their behavior changes. Best example is when you change your intentions, your behavior changes whether you know it or not.
Mhm.
So when you are searching on your network and you're collecting information and you're moving it around and you're getting ready to send it to somebody, you're doing it for a reason. If it's for your job, then your intentions are good and you're going to do it a certain way. If your intentions are bad and you're going to give it away to a competitor, we have been able to leverage how that looks differently. Is it predictive? No. Is it a risk indicator before they've done something bad that they're searching and collecting in a way that research shows leans towards more malicious intention so that you can start looking for the context, right? That
Mhm.
alert is one of many alerts. It's not going to get you in trouble. It's going to give an analyst an opportunity to take a closer look and to look for those other pieces now, right? And prioritize who they look at because there's so much data, right? And when you throw cyber in, there's so much more data. It's economizing. But I think that we leverage that to learn about things where your intention changes, your behavior changes. And we can do a lot of those kinds of activities. Or we know that this attitude is a problem. how would we measure that without talking to you, right? In psychology, you fill out those measures as if you were in college and ever did a psych test. You answer questions and we assert your attitudes or your behaviors or your intentions. Well, that's not practical. That's not how security works. We have to be able to observe it, from a distance without being intrusive, without you even knowing. But we need to validate that that observation now matches self-report, right? The science is there on psychology. If I talk to you, the science is not there that if I think I could see it without talking to you, how do I test that and prove that before we start looking at things without any justification from
Yes.
research, right? Because your legal, your HR, and your privacy are not going to let you turn on some fabulous indicators if there's no evidence that they're going to add value, because it could create some risk, right? That risk management. And so we are also building more. So I tell people a lot, MITRE is not building a new tool. We're making all of those solutions already out there smarter. That's our goal, because the tooling is there in the sense of visibility, but we don't know what it means, right? We don't know what bad looks like. As if they're not rule breaking, which is really InfoSec and cyber's job. That's not
Mhm.
insider threat's job. They have that blur line where you have to figure out, is it a pattern? Is somebody
Yes.
doing something over and over? And then you want to understand why, right? Why are they refusing to comply with said InfoSec policy? Then we get more concerned, right? That's when it
Yeah.
goes over the fence. And so I think we're trying to build those cyber indicators, and we're trying to build sets. When like an employee does these 5 things on your network, are they more risk than employees who are not doing those 5 things in the same window of time?
Got
Those will lower the false positive rate. And so we've built some more of those models that sit on all these tools. You can pick your tool as long as it has endpoint visibility. You can use the models and the indicators that we're building through research. And so we definitely have a larger cadre of cyber, I would argue, even though this is not cyber only or cyber first. It didn't
Mhm.
work. Like when I came in 2007 into Insider Threat, it was cyber only and cyber first. And my expectation was that I was going to create a profile of the last bad guy and I was going to build cyber indicators. And you don't chase the last bad guy, and their behaviors don't just naturally fall onto a cyber log. It's just not how the data works. We want patterns and behavior, and then we want to like confirm that that's what it looks like in that cyber activity or on that network. And so there's so much good in that, and it is a more automated source that we build a lot of that. Like we tried to find how we could see it in that source. The sort of non-information example, though, I think is great. It's bidirectional loyalty is something we're working on. So this is an example where I haven't solved it yet, but we are working really hard at it. And we're waiting for a next round of funding for someone to be interested to do that last part. But one of the things I get asked about is org commitment. Deanna, MITRE, tell me how to measure when my employee isn't committed to my company or my
Mhm.
organization or the government anymore. It's a perfectly good ask of
Yes.
psychologists. It's definitely an insider threat concern, so it fits right in. And so we finally had an opportunity, and I was like, okay, well, let's go explore. We learned about what the science has on org commitment. It wasn't that great to start, which we didn't know, and we're not going to go back and do fundamental research either. So we have to be smart about our role in this applied research world. But we found a little bit of enough. But something we learned from practice, like real programs, is that it's bidirectional commitment. So the commitment is, how committed am I to the organization, and how committed do I think the organization is to me?
Mm.
And it was those spies and past data that elucidated that second direction. So it wasn't just science and psychology and smart people. It was data from past bad guys that made it very clear that they perceived the organization wasn't committed to them any longer. The government wasn't committed to them. Okay, so then if we're going to measure this, we need to measure both, right? We need to be able to measure both directions of that. And so we figured out how to measure it in self-report, and we validated that. We figured out how to get managers to get pretty close to measuring it for others. That's good, but we still don't talk to everyone's managers. Like that's not an alert, that's an investigation. So we're getting closer. Now, how could we see bidirectional loyalty on your computer use, your communications, whether it's email and text? So that's that last step where we need to test out some ideas we have, but we're not going to give those ideas out until we're
Yeah.
sure they work. because then they be misused and we can be wrong. And so that's that last step, right? So we were getting there. We got to get it away, the science, and now we get to practical. How can you, as an appropriate security person, be looking for bidirectional loyalty without invading people's privacy and hopefully using only data in your house? So
Yes.
we do not advocate for monitoring people's social media and things. I did a little mini test long ago with Facebook, about 200 profiles, people identified as government people, to see like, is there even good stuff out there? Because it takes a lot of work to mine it. It's expensive, it's time consuming, and there just really wasn't a lot. You have attribution issues, you have self-presentation issues, and you add in that people just don't want you doing that. It makes them uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So it needs to be worth it, right? If I can prove that there's good stuff out there, then we'll make that argument and we'll prove its value. But right now that hasn't been there. And so we need to prove that value though in-house. And so I'm trying to use information that you already have access to in your networks, in your systems, in your organizations
Yes.
first. And so that is important. And so we're working on those. And so we're always looking for partners because all of our research is real employees in their real work environments on their real computers doing their real jobs, right? So we have to have environments where organizations will allow us to work with their employees for some of these studies and
Hmm.
ask them questions and have them complete things and have them try things so we can see what they looks like and do those experiments. And so if any of you are out there that are forward thinking organizations, partners come in many ways, right? Do you have data already? That would be awesome. Do you have employees that you would allow us to engage with, which we're very good at? Right? We make them feel good. It's not about judgment, it's about learning. And they actually usually by the end really enjoy having participated in something that advances our security, actually, for to be honest. Or do you have money, right? Like everybody brings different pieces. And so sometimes it's employees. I need
Yeah.
places where I can engage with employees safely and legally and all that good stuff. So those are the day-to-day kind of indicators. And then I will talk the big tent, and this is I get pings every single day. So this is a framework. Where is the MITRE framework for insider threat? The first phone call came after I think it was a Wired magazine article in 2018. Bank of America, their insider threat program was her name is Lisa. She was fabulous. She built a great program. She wanted to mature it. She wanted a framework. Her boss wanted a framework, right? CIOs and CISOs, they want a framework, particularly a cyber framework that has cyber in it. And she asked, and we don't have that. We don't have frameworks that are built on insider threat data. Just because they're built on cyber data or APT data, it just hasn't translated. It hasn't added value like we hoped. So now people have figured that out after
Yeah.
trying. And so, but we need data. And so I call it the long pole in the tent. So we have a lab that was actually paid for and built by them way back then that's totally air gapped to house investigative data. We have about 10, 11 organizations that have given us their investigative data. They have taken
Nice.
that bold leap to say, I really want to fix this problem. So I'm going to go through the proper steps, the proper reviews, the proper data use agreements, and I'm going to give MITRE my insider threat data and the details, not a summary, the actual data, the logs if you have them, the camera feeds if you have, whatever you collected, doesn't matter. And we're going to collapse hundreds and hopefully thousands of insider threat cases because nobody has them on their own. No organization can do that by themselves.
Wow.
There's just not. And so that is the MITRE Insider Threat Framework Initiative. I keep the word initiative at it now because we don't have it yet.
Hmm.
We need more data still though. So we
Yes.
won't wait until we have perfect data, but we need enough variety of data.
Is the
And then
confidence level in it? Yeah.
yeah, and then we know how the world works, early adoption. So once we put out the first draft that doesn't do harm and it's probably not so amazing yet because it needs more data, but it's
Mhm.
safe. It's it's probably going to reinforce something we might already know. Then we're going to get more data. Then organizations are going to want to give us data. They're going to want to tell everyone they gave us data. So then more organizations will join in because
It'll
they
just
know
get
that
better and better. Yeah.
exactly. And that's going to be better. I think getting started will be helpful. It'll help make it's kind of like arguments to legal in HR when you can point at something that says bad guys did this, right? They really did this and they did this all over the place. And so we're really eager to get there, but it is the longer pole. Like we're going to keep doing good indicators one by
Mhm.
one, but that big movement for this community is going to come with that framework as organizations get bold enough to go through the steps to get approvals. which obviously can be done because we have about a dozen that have done it. Mostly US corporate, right? And this is not government data, it's unclassified, but the lab is totally air gapped. It's backed up
Good.
in itself. If it burned down, we'd all be in big trouble at MITRE. It's in MITRE, in our Virginia location. And so once we have enough data, we will mine it. We'll get the first draft out, and then it will be public in the sense of free. It's not a charge. It won't be on the internet the same way
Yes.
as other MITRE, frameworks and things because we're not far enough ahead of the bad guys, and we're not bold enough to say we'll show it to them and they won't be able to defeat it. It's not going to be quite that simple, but we'll make sure that if you work an insider threat, like this is part of your responsibilities, that you'll have access at no cost, right? This is not about money. This is about kind of uplifting the whole community. And I work for the best people, like
Oh
insider
yeah,
threat program
MITRE
leads.
phenomenal.
No, I don't mean MITRE. I mean all those insider threat people out there. Those of you that
Okay.
lead programs, I
Yeah.
haven't met you all. I've met so many, and the dedication to this problem that doesn't have an easy answer, that they get beat up a lot by privacy and HR because they're talking about humans, but they're
Yeah.
security people, whether they're cybersecurity or not, they're still security people. They go through a lot to try to help their organizations be safe, and they don't get a lot of help. And so I think they're the best people out there to work for because they're motivated, they care, and they keep trying even
Yeah.
when it's not easy. And so we're gonna keep trying. And so now that we have a cadre, we're not giving up. But that framework will be the blessing, and I will. So the plea is
And
like,
I
be
know a lot
bold.
of the industry is eagerly waiting for that first draft. Doctor, Caputo, you said earlier, and it lit up the light bulb for me. Whether you talked about intentions and behaviors, right? They go hand in hand. And it's funny because there's a lot of relationship experts. When they talk about people cheating, people, hiding secret families, or just hiding secrets. The behavior shifts. Like if someone is engaging in an extramarital affair, for example, they'll do things like they all of a sudden get real protective of their phone. That's a great behavior indicator of someone changing how they act normally, and in the advice. So I can see where the psychology applies to relationships, applies within the cyberspace. I love how the science of it and the behavioral science is applicable, whether it's human relationships to the relationships in the office and the workplace. So I love it. I love that it's just right there hand in hand. I want to talk about another subject within behavior sciences in regards to cyberspace because we hear a lot about ZTA, zero trust architecture, and all these solutions out there. And one of the components of every one of the ZTA solutions out there is a UBA, user behavior analysis section, or a UEBA, user and entity, because AI systems now can act like humans to a degree. What are some of the perspectives you have on this as it relates to zero trust within the work and research that you and your team are doing, and how is the approach to addressing it?
Well, to be fair to the UAM and UBA community, that those existed long before zero trust. So I want to preface that those aren't zero trust. Zero
Yeah.
trust is gobbling them up and adding them to their
Yes.
mission. But those missions existed long before we were talking about zero trust. So, but it is about monitoring, right? It's about detecting things, monitoring things, flagging things. And the zero trust part is being able to know who did what when, right? That's what zero trust helps with. Zero trust really, I mean, these are people they're already in. So unfortunately, zero trust doesn't really solve a lot of problems. You're confirming that's them, which
Yeah.
is great for an APT, but for insider threat, like we already know they're inside the house. We let them inside, we gave them the credentials. We are choosing to trust them, at least initially. And
Mhm.
so zero trust itself isn't really going to help insider threat as much as we would want. It's going to help other things, but it's not, I don't think the insider threat community sees it adding a lot of
Yeah.
value.
And I'm glad
Um,
you said that because again, it goes back to people are looking for that silver bullet, the magic bullet that's going to zero out that potential. And
right.
uh, and I think again, we've had in the defense contractor world. I know you mentioned the bilateral loyalty issue. Well, with defense contractors, you add a slight little ripple there where you have loyalty. If you have a clearance, you have loyalty to your nation, to the United States, right? And then
Hopefully.
there's the loyalty that you have to the logo that's on your paycheck. So if you're federal or defense contractor, you have a paycheck that has a logo on it, some kind of company loyalty to the defense contractor, and as well as a loyalty to the organization you're supporting, and at the highest level, loyalty to your country, right? And so I do see this as a very daunting challenge. So I can only just say I am glad that you and your team are tackling that because I could imagine myself beginning to tackle the wrinkles that that all presents. But I know we could talk forever about these different facets of it, and it's so fascinating to me. I mean, I'm geeking out over listening to you speak about the work that you and your team are doing, and I'm really interested in when this framework does hit the streets. And folks, when it does, sign up for the alerts and the updates so that when it hits the streets, you can be one of the first people to read about this great work. Because again, going through the amount of data and trying to build something where there's nothing there that exists to help us address it other than some training and the obvious red flags. But sometimes if someone is really good, like if you take someone with a very narcissistic personality and they are very intelligent, because a lot of people think intelligence equals trustworthiness. No, actually, it's the worst. I think there's a clip about the SEAL Team Six. I think it's Simon Sinek was talking about when he questioned the SEAL Team Six, how did they select the members? And they'd rather have a person of high trust, low capability, or I forget the metric they were using, because trust was everything. And so, but
Right.
a lot of times in IT cyber, people look for, oh, this guy is a genius. He's the smartest guy in the team. We're going to give him access and to give him the keys to the kingdom. And what was the most famous case of all time where this happened with access creep was Ed Snowden. And of course, that famous NSA worker, he collected a lot of data, was able to leave the network with lots of data. And of course, of all those leaks and WikiLeaks, etc. That's a great example of sometimes just because someone's super intelligent does not mean they're super trustworthy. So again, this is another challenge for MITRE and Dr. Caputo and her team to work through because in IT cyber, we have a lot of people with egos. We have a lot of people that are narcissists. But sometimes you have, I hate to say it this way, and I know with your behavior science, if you're going to be like, no, that's not the proper way. But the way I look at it is they can be malicious narcissists, and you can have I don't want to use the word good narcissism, but you can have people they're not meant to be malicious, like people that are prideful, have an ego. I don't know if there's another term for it, but I think in the world what happens a lot is people just label them as a narcissist. Kind of like autism. There's a big spectrum, but there's actually Asperger's. There's all kinds of definitive diagnosis that can happen along that path. So I know you may have a different opinion on that, but I do know that generally in IT cyber, we got a lot of people that got big egos, a lot of people that got big brains and think they're smarter than the government, smarter than the security systems, smarter than the security manager. And so when they are compromised with their ethics and morals to do something malicious, negligent, or to steal, because like you said, they may lose confidence in their government. Right now, I guess not to get into politics, but we're in a very unusual time where we had a presidential change and about half the country, let's just say 50-50, every 4 years, half the country is not going to be happy with who's in office and what they're doing. And could be a real potential right now because we see the Doge and a lot of cuts happening within government where you can have an environment that's now conducive towards disgruntledness to even hatred that could potentially be pushed towards acting upon thoughts, right? We all have thoughts from time to time. We get angry. These are natural things. But then when you combine the anger now with something that's compelling you, meaning you're worried about you might lose your job. You're worried about, or you did get cut and you got cut on a Tuesday and you're still going to be in office for another day or two. There's a lot of opportunity if it's not handled appropriately through the proper channels and with at least a little degree of, I guess I'll say, empathy from the HR and the handling of how you execute upon these very drastic changes in people's lives. So what
Right.
would you and your team, because I would think that you and your team right now, if any data you could get right now with these agencies that are having to lay off hundreds of people, like for example, under Homeland Security, you had CISA. I mean, they just gutted that whole red team from there. And that to me, red team people, your penetration, your hackers, those are your most skilled people that could cover their tracks, that has the knowledge and capability to maneuver around sensors and systems. So is that something you and your team? I mean, I don't, if you can't talk due to confidentiality, I understand. But to me, right now would be a hotbed of data if you could get your hands on it.
I think we have a hotbed of risk. Funny enough, because government people are in government as civil servants and mission oriented, that buffers a whole lot of this risk, right? Those
Good.
red teamers could have been making buku bucks outside of CISA long
Yeah.
before now, right? So
Yes.
yeah, they might be angry. Uncertainty is really hard for humans and
Yes.
change, right? So the question is, what is going to be enough? Because you have all of them, and they're not all going to become insider threats. And some of it is other circumstances around their situation. Some of it is how patriotic and mission oriented were they, where yes, they are not happy with the outcome, but that doesn't mean they want to harm our national and homeland security either. So I don't think you're going to see, it's not like every person that has been removed is then going to do something bad. I mean, they're technically all an insider threat. They're leaving.
Yeah.
And I think what you're going to see is a good chunk of them are going to take stuff to help benefit their future work. And that puts it at risk that they could change their minds and become more unhappy about their situation, risks that their roommate now has access to things that they shouldn't have taken, meaning they
That need to
shouldn't have
know.
had access,
Mhm.
or an APT breaks into their computer and now has a whole bunch of stuff that they shouldn't have had. And so I worry most, to be honest, about the cadre that is just going to take things that they took part in. They think it's part of them, but it's really not your data. It's not your information. It feels like that though, and I recognize that feeling, but the risk it will pose for that good mission person to just take it so that they can do better things for the country later is a risk, and that is a huge risk. And
Yes.
and so we are going to see an uptick. Programs are they're buckling down. We're getting more requests for extremism and other indicators and things that we've built because they want to prepare, and we're doing our best to share as quickly as we can with those that just maybe didn't have anything or didn't have what we have yet because they were doing good and now they got a big shuffle. So I
Yeah.
think that you're right. We are right for a situation. Unfortunately, I don't think you're going to be able to predict that belly button because think about, right, people's skills, people have integrity. It's very hard to measure who has more integrity than someone else
You're right.
without a lot of behavior. And so we're not going to be able to pick them out of a crowd. They're probably going to be less obvious. I
Mhm.
will caveat the narcissism. So there is no data that says narcissists are more likely to be insiders. I
Okay.
know it's so intuitive, but you are right that there are malignant narcissists. That's a clinical term,
Okay.
and that is concerning. Narcissists do amazing things for this country and world because they're bold enough to keep
CEOs,
plowing.
executives. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and snakes in suits, like it's true. So we want to be careful because we need them. At the same time, we know that they come with risk because, yeah, they're very self-focused and they're willing to boldly do things that harm other individuals along the way sometimes, for sure. Um, but what we do know is that most insiders are not clinical. That is what we see here at MITRE, and
Okay.
we've seen dozens of programs. We want to believe there's something wrong with those humans, like really wrong,
Yeah.
like
Like
medication or
he's a serial
psychiatry.
killer. He's an axe murderer. But
Right.
yeah.
You want to because it makes us feel better. It means I would never do it. It means my friend would never do it. My child would never do it. My colleague would never do it. It's totally for our own mental security. But the data just doesn't support it. The majority are good humans that are in sticky situations and they make really bad choices.
Bad
That's what it
choice.
comes down to. We
Yeah.
don't see this pretty pathway. There's no pathway.
There's no
What we see is
mastermind planning this 10-year long hack and the salami slicing algorithm. No, it's just,
they're a
like
little
you said,
piece,
down to a
right?
bad choice.
Yeah, we can't negate there are trade craft out there, right? And there are nation states and they're coming at us. But they're a small slice.
Yeah, yeah,
The
yeah.
slice, and again, maybe they're so brilliant we never catch any of them. I'm not
Yeah.
sure.
The
I
best
agree. I
spies in the
know
world, they're not James Bond because James Bond's got a whole film franchise. He's the most unsuccessful spy, I think, in the world.
we gave away all his trade craft already to
Yeah.
everybody. But we
Um,
have those too, and we want to prepare for them. But what we really want to prepare are the good people. They get in a bad situation and they make a really bad choice, and we want to get it before they get to
before
the
it gets
choice, right?
bad.
And we want to help them and we want to keep them. So it's a good outcome if we can do our jobs really
Yeah.
well.
Okay. Well, Dr. Caputo, I know we're getting down short on time, so I got a lot more questions. I'm gonna try to rush them through. The first question I love to ask all my guests is if we could go back in time, because you've had a great career so far, and you still got miles and miles to go in your career. But and I love that you and your team are doing this work. So I just want to get that out of the way. But if we could go back to the day one when you made the decision that I want to work within this realm and this is the work I want to do in my career, what is there a story there that you could share with us?
So I came to MITRE. from doing Intel, and I was supposed to do more Intel for one of our defense Intels. And Greg Stevens, so he's out there somewhere. I haven't seen him in decades. He worked at MITRE. He was an engineer, systems engineer, and he had been working on an insider threat tool, probably one of the beginning network solutions, not even endpoint quite there. He
Okay.
worked for a sponsor. He's built an amazing thing. He said, I want to do an experiment about human behavior. So he came to the social behavioral sciences department at MITRE and he pitched his experiment. And after he left, most of the room laughed at him and were like, you can't do that. There's no way. And I sat there and went, and then they asked, does anybody want to try to help him? And it was kind of a little bit of a grudge sale because he was a little bit out there and trying to do things. And I was curious. I was intrigued. I didn't know anything about insider threat, right? That concept, what does that mean? Sounds kind of interesting. And so I think mine, again, most things are opportunistic, right? It's an opportunity. And I think if you raise your hand, you get to do cool stuff. If I had not raised my
Totally.
hand that day, I don't think I would be doing insider threat. But that was like it's 6 months in, and so the rest of my minor time has been on other
Wow.
human cyber issues, like you.
Oh, we may have lost the video. Oh, there you are. Okay.
Yeah, and again, it's taking an opportunity. If you're intrigued and you're curious, you should you should say yes to a lot of things
I
because
absolutely
that not
love
only
it.
means you'll be good at it probably because you're so curious, but like that's what makes work not work, right? It's not
Yes.
work. It's fun. And I don't say fun at the expense of bad, but it's fun because I get to use my skills to do
Mhm.
something good. And I find
Yeah.
that fun. And I get to think with smart people and try to solve a problem. But it all happened. One person sort of kicked it all off and we brainstormed and someone where you can bounce ideas off of. And not too long after, a couple years, he left MITRE, and I just kept plowing forward. But he was a big piece of kind of jumping into this. And Sherry Lawrence Flieger, who should be well known in cyber, one of the early, I would say grandparent makes her sound so old, but she's amazing. She was on a project that he had, and she saw me present some of the experiment stuff that we do. And she just came over and was like you are so needed in our world and was so welcoming, and then she was my mentor for years and I'm
Wow.
so grateful. She's been retired, but she did amazing things, but like that support, right, calling it out and encouraging me and saying you have something offering that we haven't done, and she's this brilliant person who's already done amazing things,
Yeah.
to say like, "Ooh, you can help us." I was like, I can't help you, you're fabulous already. But it was so when people want to back you, you should remember that, right?
Mhm.
And you raise your hand when you're curious about something specific within cyber or whatever it is you do, and you can go down these really cool paths, right?
The
And
world
I
is a much safer place that you raised your hand. So thank you for raising your hand. Thank you for sharing that story. I like to take a moment. We did a lot of technical talking so far, and then there's a moment in the podcast where I like to do a moment of levity, where I ask just some rapid fire, no right or wrong answer questions. So if you'll humor
Okay,
me for a second, I'm gonna hit you with some questions. First answer comes to
absolutely.
mind. Okay. All right.
Sounds
So
fun.
first question: cake or pie?
Oh, cake.
Cake. What kind of
Do I
cake?
have to explain?
What kind of cake?
Strawberry or
Strawberry
lemon.
cake. Oh,
Yeah, my
or
wedding was
lemon. Okay.
all lemon. They're like, you don't have
For
chocolate cake.
hot or
No.
cold cake?
Ooh, cold cake.
Cold cake. Okay, there's
Interesting
some people
version
out
of
there
that.
like cold cake. All right. Is a hot
Yeah.
dog a sandwich?
My kids, I have a 10-year-old and a 14-year-old. We literally had this conversation. I think we're taking it to extremes, but I think a hot dog by technicalities is two pieces of bread with something in between. It can be considered a sandwich.
Okay.
But why do we have to label it? That's my
Why do we
question.
have to label it? Okay. What this is splits the room every time in the IT cyber world. So are you Star Wars or Star Trek?
Star Wars. I'm not, and I wasn't into Star Wars until I was in grad school. So I'm in a PhD program, and they forced me to sit down and watch
Forced
them
you.
all. I was shamed to the fact that I had never seen any Star Wars, and I watched them all. And I am married to a big Star Wars fan. It just doesn't. I don't get it. Sorry
No worries.
to the
What has
fans,
been
Trekkies. I think
what has been your most favorite book of all time that you've read, and what was the most recent book that you've read?
Harry Potter is the that is books for me. So I don't have time to read books. I'm a very slow reader. I'm a fast writer. So even my team,
Okay.
like, call it out. I'm the slowest reader on my team, but I read well and I get good ideas. But Harry Potter was in grad school. I was reading for school. I didn't want to read a book, but my best friend was like, "You are so boring. You need to read a book." I was like, "What? Rude." And she said, just try it. And she gave me the British edition, the original, not the
Okay.
US. So it has that British language, so just different, the original language. And it was just a breath of fresh air from the real world. I think that's what turned a part of it for me. Right? I'm a psychologist. I'm working on things. I was working on eyewitness lineups for my grad work. So all legal, sad, right? There's an innocence project. These people go to prison. It's a lot. The world is a lot, and I want to be part of it. But the break. So the Harry Potter series, I came late, I caught up, and
Okay.
then I was there when that book came out at Barnes& Noble at midnight. I was there waiting for my book, and I
Uh-huh.
got the British ones from abroad as well. And so I would say Harry Potter is the reason I started reading again, like for pleasure. So I will
Okay.
call that out. And the latest book would be The Dresden Files, right? So Jim
Okay.
Butcher. So again, I think it's the same kind of line. Like, it's not reality, which sometimes
Hmm.
is good. In my world, stepping out of reality is a good thing. They solve a problem, it comes to a conclusion. That's something for me. And so I read shockingly all 17, which my family is shocked by. My family are readers, my husband and my kids. I'm slow. It takes me too long, but I've gotten all 17, but it only took me 10 years to do all
10
of them,
years, 17
right?
books.
10
Yeah.
years, 17 books. Most readers would laugh me out of a room doing 10 books and, you know what I mean, 17 books in 10 years. That's about as fast as I get, one, maybe 2 a year.
Okay.
But we all have special skills, and mine is other ways of reassuring people that don't require reading.
Yeah. So, I know with the day job, it's really demanding, and of course, having a family and all these obligations there. But I know a lot of professionals, we do try to make time for causes and things that are near and dear to our heart or have impacted our lives or that we just feel is a good cause in the world doing some good. So, the focus of this question is kind of to shine a light on any nonprofits, volunteer work, charities that either you give your time, energy, or money to, or that you simply want to just shine a light on what they do, who they are. And of course, if you give me the links for them, I'll put their socials and the links down below for people to check them out. But a lot of us, we do make that time and effort to support these causes, and there's so many great causes in the world. Is there any that you'd like to share?
Right now, the bulk of my causes are my mom job, right? My second full-time job. 10 and 14 are ages. So I'm putting my time into their schools, right? Making changes in their schools, being part of why does my middle schooler have an iPad and not a real computer?
Mm,
Why don't kids know how to type? They don't teach them.
they can't
I got
even
to teach them how
handwrite.
to type.
Yeah.
Right, right. Cursive went out, but cursive came back.
Yeah.
During COVID, the only time you will ever see me in the media, I'm not a big fan of video, was I was on the news here in Arlington saying, why aren't our schools open? Like, our kids are suffering. Again, this is not the debate about health. This was
Yeah.
like later in, but the debate was like, I'm watching kids suffer. There are not enough psychologists to help them. What are we going to do? And so I would say school boards and school stuff is where I put it, but it is for children.
Yes.
And with that though, my son's been in the Arlington Children's Chorus. I've been on their board for years.
Nice.
And we even kept going during COVID. We are the only choir I know of that still got together
Good that they
in a
kept the
big
music
giant room
going.
with giant cold windows open, right? Spread out 6 feet every kid so that they could still sing because that brings joy.
Yes.
And even if they're spread out 6 feet and they're freezing, they still came,
Yeah.
right? And so I think choirs and organizations for children are right now my focus. And it's not just because I'm a parent, but I do think that's a big reason because I can see more.
Oh yeah.
I get it more. I still watch mine, but I watch others, and I want to help them. Even the sextortion. I want to go to every middle and high school and explain to those young teenagers that you can survive awful pictures being put on the internet. You
Yes.
can. So you don't need to take your life. You need
Yeah.
to get help. You can change your name, you can move. So those are the causes I think that like bring me emphasis. And I am a singer, so the singing ties in. So that is my oasis. Like some of you go running and your brain just shuts down. I sing since
Mhm.
I was 10. And so so outlets for people to like breathe and take a break from life, and know that life is worth living and that they have the time to realize that. So those are the places where I put my attention
I
right now.
appreciate you sharing that because, I'm an author and I have a book series that I published long ago. I'll try not to get too long-winded here, but the series was to promote two young. I was a single parent for 17 years of two girls. That's why I got all this white hair. And raising my girls, I based the main character off of both my daughters, and so it's a 12-year-old girl named Alex who her mother taught her Latin. She gets transported to a world where math and Latin make magic. And my Gandalf of the series is Archimedes. So him and other Greek mathematicians are in this world trying to make it a better place. And she knows Latin, but she doesn't know mathematics. So throughout the series, she learns about more about mathematics. And it was to help kids see beyond A plus B equals C as just a linear equation that just was like, I'm never going to use this in the real world. And through the concept of fantasy story that blends those magical elements, I've helped so many children go from failing to C level to honor roll. And beyond that, I had one girl that wanted to take her life, and it was my third book where I have a lot of negative things happening. And the theme that I wrote to in that book was the theme of hope, never giving up hope. And when she read that book, she had actually read the first two books when she was in junior high, but then she kind of forgot about the series. It took me, I think, 3 years to write that third book. But when the third book came out, she was living on a friend's couch because she is her orientations of herself was not aligned to her parents' religious views, and so she got kicked out of her home, and she was in, she was contemplating, checking out, and she saw on her social media feeds, I guess, an ad for one of my books, or my social media for the books, and she said, "Oh, I never knew there was another book." She luckily downloaded the ebook, read it, and then when she messaged me, I was in my kitchen. I was living in the Woodlands, Texas at the time, and I'm sorry to get long-winded. If you have to go, just let me know. But long story short, she explained a little bit of her situation to me. She said that it was your book, your words that kept me from taking my life. And I remembered I fell on my kitchen floor bawling because it's like words can be so powerful, and understanding that again, the power that you could have in a young person's life. So when you talk about going to schools and speaking, uh, keep doing so. That is just a greater purpose to keep a young person with a young developing mind. I think when it comes to these things, these traumas, these negative events that can happen in our lives, because I'm a foster kid. I grew up in Central Louisiana, Fort Polk, but I was in foster care since I was the age of 9, and I dealt with several levels of abuse and traumas in my life. And I think when you talk about breaking the cycle of abuse, for example, right, it is a choice, and you empower yourself and it's not just like a single choice. I tell people a lot, our personalities are like 1,000 plus little choices and micro decisions we made along our path in life. And that's who we decide to be. But any moment, you could just decide to be this other person. You could just completely change who you are. That's the beauty of free will. But it does take, like, behaviors take time to become permanent, right? Like learning anything, it takes time and dedication to do something different. But back to that point, thank you so much for being a light to young people. That's a gift to the world, and I thank you. And I also thank the work that you and your team are doing. I know we're running over time now. I want to respect your time, but I'm so excited about this insider threat framework. What I'd like to give you is a final word. So if there's any knowledge, information, or things statements you want to make for people, this is your last few minutes of the podcast. All for you.
No, I think that's wonderful. And we want, just like at work, you bring hope. And I remind people you can overcome humiliation and embarrassment. And even at work, like you make a bad choice, you engage with a bad person, you even did something that might be bad, it can be undone. And I think that the message is that you can recover from almost anything, right? And I say almost because trauma is really hard.
Yes.
But trauma happens at work, right? Expectations aren't met. People get hurt in their workplace, both physically and emotionally. Like they're not treated well, and it's hard to see it. And so, my message is first, though, and this is always my closing, people are the missing link. And for you, cyber, who use the coin, the missing are, people are the weak link. I really want to push back on that notion, and I do that every opportunity I can. People are the missing link. They're how we're going to fix this. They were not weak. They are human. And if
Yes.
they weren't human, we wouldn't like them probably. That's
Yes.
the
True.
problem, right? When people lose their humanness, those people, they get
Mm.
so hard and they lose their humanness. We don't like them. So I don't want a workplace full of non-humans. I want a workplace full of humans that are going to do their best under the circumstances they're in, which we never know what's going on outside their world. And again, you shouldn't be looking unless you have another reason to be concerned in your workplace. That's not the point. But acknowledging that things are going on for people and giving people whatever they need and that support that's appropriate, and recognizing that life is hard. And we call it adulting now. I love that we give a verb, that it's a thing and it's difficult. It's totally worth it, but it's hard. So people are a missing link. We need to bring them in, but we need to be smart about it. And we need to take care of each other the right ways that are appropriate in workplace and things. And this is my best thing. You can always ask people how they're doing. Like, don't ever underestimate the value of how are you doing? Or, what, you don't seem like you're very happy. And they may say, I'm fine. But the fact that you asked and that you saw them is so important. And it was, what, 2 seconds? Because most of the time, truly, most of the time, they'll be like, I'm fine.
Yeah.
They will. They don't want to tell you. They don't want to engage. They don't want to break down, whatever. So you've taken 30 seconds of your life to say, I just want to see how you're doing. They're going to say, I'm fine. They're going to move on. But that question could change their day. It could change their week. It could change their decision to do something bad just by being seen that somebody cares, even without any further engagement. So we shouldn't underestimate the abilities we have with our words very quickly. We're all busy to make a change and prevent something that we never even knew was going to happen. But you don't have to worry about that part. Just care.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that and giving your time to the podcast today. And again, please keep doing the great work you and your team are doing at MITRE. MITRE, I'm a huge fan of MITRE and all the different programs they do. They're a wonderful organization, and I know they're better off for having you with them. And the world is better off with you and your team doing the work you're doing. So we're looking forward to that framework draft coming out in the near future. And again, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. And I have the best team here. So we'll be back.
All right.
Take care.